Well, everyone, I'd like to welcome you to this talk. It's one of four we have left in the Biodiversity Museum Day month. This year it's a virtual month as opposed to one big day. But we are excited that Lynn Kimsey, she's a professor and director of the Bohart Museum of Entomology, is going to talk to us today about murder hornets, but also in general, hornets and yellowjackets. Oh my is the name of her title. If you want to ask questions, you will see a Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. And so you can press that, and then you can type a question into Lynn. And Lynn has agreed to take questions throughout. So anytime she's saying something, if you have an immediate question, just pop it in there and she'll do her best to answer them. Or also at the end, if you want to save up questions for the end. And she's also open to talking about sort of anything entomological. And as you heard from the start of this, even tardigrades as well. So I'll turn this over to Lynn and we can begin.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you guys could come today. Well, in a virtual way, I suppose I should say. We're going to talk about murder hornets, yellowjackets, paper wasps. They all kind of belong to the same group, have a lot of the same habits, kind of. So, all right, let's go. Okay, these are all social wasps. That means that they have nests that generally have a queen and workers, a little variation in that. Unlike honeybees, they are pretty large and hairless, and their legs are not modified to carry anything. Right? These guys are all predators or scavengers. Most of them build their nests in pre-existing cavities in the ground or on trees or in buildings. So what's important about these guys? Okay, well, yellowjackets and hornets can sting. This is bad. They're usually looking for insect prey, not you. This is good. Unfortunately, some of them like to share picnics, and this is bad. Okay, so who's who with the social wasps? A little bit about the biology first. These guys eat insects. Some of them eat garbage, nectar, even carrion. They all need water for their nests. They're only active during the day. There are some rare exceptions in the tropics, but not here. And generally, the temperatures have to be 60 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer for them to be active, because they don't really have any way to warm up. And then finally, their nests aren't built from wax or anything like this. They're built from plant fibers and saliva. Yay. Okay, and here's the other thing about them. Normally, the nests only last one season. Okay, and usually it's the queen who lays eggs. Sometimes if something happens to the queen, one of the workers can take over. So it's not really like honeybees in that there's a strict caste system. Okay, at the end of the season, and I'll talk about this more, the new queens produced by the nests mate, and then they hibernate over the winter. And then in the spring, they found new colonies. So here's a typical example of what happens in California. Now, other places with different climates, it's a little bit different. All right, so from November through probably into March, the new queens are overwintering. Right? They're just hanging out someplace, cold, turned off, waiting for it to warm up enough for them to start flying. Okay, come that time in March, usually, could be happening earlier, they go out, they start looking for food because they need to eat. They need protein, they need sugar to help them start building a new nest and start producing brood. Okay, then as soon as there are enough workers in the nest, the queen never leaves again. She just stays there producing more brood while the workers take care of everything else. As you get later in the summer, around August, they go into maintenance mode. Most of these colonies start to, you might say, shut down, right? So brood production drops way off. They're feeding mostly on sugars to maintain. And then by, again, November, ish, the colonies will produce males and new queens, and the colony will eventually die. The males eventually die after mating with the queens. The new queens go hide and start the whole system all over again. Now, stinging too is quite different in these than what we think of with honeybees, right? Hornet and Yellowjacket stingers, they're smooth and needle-like. And this means, unlike honeybees, they can keep poking you. So you can't assume that the thing that's stinging you is going to stop. Honeybees, on the other hand, you can see the picture there, it has serrations. And so when it penetrates the skin, it hooks there and it can't come back out again. Not the case with these guys, with hornets and yellowjackets. The other thing too is, particularly hornets, the sting is big, it's long. It's up to 1/4 of an inch long, if you can picture that. Yellowjackets, about 1/8 to 1/6 of an inch. Honeybee sting is only about 1/8 of an inch long. So these hornets, think of them as being like samurai, with samurai knife. Now, here's the other thing, this drives me crazy. I keep hearing people talking about being bitten by yellowjackets. These wasps don't bite. It's the wrong end of the body. Only the females can sting and not bite. And the sting is basically a modified egg-laying tube. Right? So the males just can't have these. And then this is loaded with venom, which in the case of these wasps is used for prey capture and colony defense. Now, the other thing about these wasps is that you can't assume they can't understand you, right? They're attracted to certain kinds of odors that you find in cosmetics, so suntan lotion and that kind of thing. Also, wasps and honeybees too recognize eyes, because most of their nest predators are vertebrates. This is to their benefit, because if they can incapacitate you by stinging you around the face, you're going to leave their colony. Okay, so in this line of thought, it also means that their venom is specifically designed to hurt you. It's designed for vertebrates. Wasps will use it for prey capture, but there's that other component that's designed just for vertebrates. Okay, so just to sort of summarize this, the difference between yellowjackets, hornets, paper wasps, and honeybees is in yellowjackets and hornets, the sting is both offensive and defensive. It's smooth, doesn't have any barbs, they sting repeatedly. And it seems counterintuitive, but the allergic reactions people have to these stings tend to be less severe than they are with honeybees. In honeybees, the sting is only defensive. Think about this. What would prey on a honeybee colony? It would be a human, a bear, something like that, right? So that thing has to pack a wallop. It's barbed so that when honeybee stings, the stinger comes out of the body along with the poison gland, and it will continue to put poison into the wound until it's removed or runs out. And as a consequence of all of this, people tend to have really severe allergic reactions to honeybee stings, or they can, right? So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Schmidt sting index, but my colleague Justin Schmidt is completely certifiably insane. And he has, shall we say, taste tested each one of these insects to see how badly the sting hurts. The man's completely insane. Anyway, so I've starred the hornets and the yellowjackets, paper wasps, to show you where they kind of fall in on all of this. And I love some of his descriptions. Yellowjackets, like extinguishing a cigar on your tongue. Tim Lawrence asks, what accounts for the difference in the kind of pain experienced between honeybee and hornets? The difference is that honeybee venom is loaded with things like the chemicals that cause pain, that cause swelling, that cause inflammation, because those things in combination prolong the experience. And you don't find that particular combination in yellowjackets and hornets. Okay. All right. Anyway, paper wasps, like spilling a beaker of hydrochloric acid on a paper cut. Yeah. But you can see where honeybees fall in all of this. The other thing about honeybee venom is that it lasts. Whereas with these guys, it's going to hurt a lot for a relatively short period, but it doesn't last because they lack these compounds that cause inflammation and pain and so on. Okay, if you are stung, let me just go over that a little bit because I think that's kind of important. Local reaction, you get swelling where the sting was, oral antihistamines and cold compresses, Benadryl's the compound of choice. However, if you have a severe reaction, like you've got throat constriction or tightness in your chest, trouble breathing, that's a 911 call. If the swelling is fast and severe, that's a 911 call. And in the case of, not these guys so much usually, but honeybees, if you receive a huge number of stings, like in the hundreds, it's not the venom that's going to kill you, it's kidney failure due to all the foreign protein that's been injected. So their dialysis becomes of critical importance. Now, emergency treatment in these cases would be obviously an injection of epinephrine, but that has to be balanced with Benadryl and going to the hospital. Okay, so let's compare yellowjackets and hornets then with paper wasps, because these are all in the same family, Vespidae, but their biology is kind of different. Yellowjackets and hornets, their cells, where the brood is, it's all enclosed in a paper envelope, right? And it doesn't have a stalk. These nests could have thousands or even hundreds of thousands of cells. They feed on live insects. Some of them are scavengers. Basically, if you like it, they like it. Paper wasps, on the other hand, no envelope. Now, the cells are always visible, kind of in a stack maybe. The nest is attached to a surface by a stalk. And at least here, the paper wasp nests tend to have usually fewer than 100 cells, maybe a couple of hundred. And these guys only feed on live insects. There's no scavenging that goes on with these. Okay, so the comparison, envelope, no envelope, stalked, not stalked, big nests, smaller ones, and then the food, the diet sort of varies from group to group. Picnics in the summer. I don't know how many of you have done this, but every once in a while, if you're drinking a soda at a picnic, you might get a surprise in your mouth when you realize you've just almost swallowed a yellowjacket that was in there for the sugar. Not much fun. Okay, so here are the pests. Okay, all of these except giant hornets at this point are found in California. Okay, we have the European paper wasp, Western yellowjacket, giant hornets, bald-faced hornet. Okay, so the two on the left are both exotics from Europe and Asia. The two on the right are native species. Now let's start off with the European paper wasp because it's everywhere now. Okay, these were introduced from Europe, not intentionally, but here they are. Bright black and yellow with sort of orange antennae, but the most distinctive thing is the two polka dots on the abdomen. Right? These guys are almost always associated with human structures, human habitats, and they make this very obvious open face nest. So originally it showed up in a UPS building in Sacramento. It was about 1989. By the year 2000, it was pretty much throughout the central and northern part of the valley. By 2013, it made it into SoCal, and now this wasp is probably pretty much everywhere that humans have modified. They build in, I mean, literally any protected place, and they're really easily transported. We discovered this sort of by accident because I did a course down in San Luis Obispo where we were burning cars. It's a long story, but it was very entertaining. But anyway, we were bringing cars, used vehicles up from the Port of Long Beach to San Luis Obispo. And we would go through and dismantle parts of them for various reasons. We popped the side view mirror off the driver's side of this one sedan. And you can see the nests in there. There were 4 European paper wasp nests in that, behind that mirror. So we had already transported it from LA to San Luis Obispo. That's how easy it is. Underneath tile roofs, under eaves, all kinds of places like that. They're generally small nests, but again, you can see they're very distinctively colored wasps, bright black and yellow with orange legs and antennae, very, very distinctive things. And if it's on your eaves or in your roof right now, it's bound to be one of these, not one of the native species of paper wasp. Now, but there's a good side to these as well, and that is that they only provision with live insects. And it varies, but it could be as few as 3 insects per cell. Okay, so you see that nest right there, it's got a couple dozen cells, it looks like. These guys forage for cutworms, flies, other kinds of insects like that. One nest of this size could take over 300 pest insects. Yeah, so we always complain about, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get stung by the wasps in my, attic. But there's a real benefit to these in some cases. Now, this example I'm going to show you in a minute, it just knocks your socks off. So a friend of mine, has a farm about 30 acres north of here, and he was complaining about the number of these paper wasp nests that he's had all over his property. We made a rough estimate. In that 30 acres, there were about 2,000 nests. Think about this. We estimated that these wasps on his property were taking more than 60,000 insects in that season. I said to him, so do you like flies or do you like wasps? Because obviously you're generating a huge amount of something that they are eating or they wouldn't be here in these numbers. So you have to kind of consider both sides of some of these things. With these guys, yes, they're exotics, but they're better adapted to human modified habitats than the native ones are. So it's not a bad thing. Okay, Yellowjackets. Now, this is the genus Vespula. The previous group were Polistes. I didn't put that in, but it doesn't matter. Yellowjacket nests are always enclosed in a paper wrapper. And some of the paper that they manufacture is absolutely gorgeous stuff. The combs are always enclosed in an envelope, regardless of where the nest is built. Like this entire truck. Here, right now, the biggest pest yellowjackets are Vespula germanica, which is a European import, and Vespula pennsylvanica, which is really the single biggest pest vespula in the world at this point, right? Pennsylvanica is easy to identify because it's the one species, see the blue arrow, it's the one that has a yellow eye ring that goes all the way around the eye, and it's got a sort of a rectangle on the first abdominal segment, a black rectangle surrounded by yellow, very distinctive creature. Okay, bright yellow and black coloration, the complete eye ring. You can see the eyes are notched on that bottom picture. You can see how the antenna sort of inserts near where this notch is, and that bright diamond. These are definitely wasps with an attitude. Now, these nests can be built underground or in structures, hollow trees, for example. The nests can be huge. And on average, say, thousands of workers, but it can get much bigger than that. I have a colleague who works for Nature Conservancy in Hawaii, and he sent me a picture of him standing on a nest that they had killed and excavated on Maui of this western yellowjacket. So it's gotten itself introduced into a lot of different places, including Hawaii, where it's a major pest. Anyway, this nest that he was standing on, and it literally was 6 feet long by 3 feet by 3 feet. They estimated there were at least 5 million workers in this nest, if you can picture that. And it was perennial. It didn't die out at the end of the season. It kept getting bigger and bigger. The thing about these guys is that they not only feed on live prey, but they also scavenge. So these are the ones that are likely to come in to your picnic or your garbage can. They're always looking for sources of protein and sugar. Now, in mild climates, they can become perennial. We're starting to see this now in nests along the coast of California and in Southern California. And these, like I said, these nests can become absolutely enormous. Like this one's from South Carolina, where the nest fills the interior of the sedan. This one is a major pest. Now, the German yellowjacket, Vespa germanica, it's now seems to be well established. It doesn't compete really well with the Western yellowjacket, apparently, but we now have it in these 9, 10 counties, Contra Costa, and then around the Bay, and then LA Basin. It's a little hard to know. Tim Lawrence is asking whether multiple queens occur in Western yellowjackets. Yes and no. What happens is that if something happens to the queen, the resident queen, the workers are not sterile. So one or more of them can take over egg laying, but they're going to be producing males because they're not mated. So then the colony has to produce males, and it's a balancing act. Now, it's possible that there are multiple queens established in a colony, but it would have to be a huge colony. And I don't think anybody's found this, but think of how intimidating it would be to try to discover how many queens were in a colony of 1 million workers. I don't know. I wouldn't do it, but you know. So here's where the German yellowjacket is found now. It's hitchhiked all over everywhere. It's even in New Zealand and Australia. And it's because, and this is same is true of the hornets that I'll be talking about, is that we ship so many cargo containers around the world. If this is happening during the winter, an overwintering queen could very easily be in that cargo container when it goes across the Pacific or the Atlantic. Right? So the fact that we don't have more of these exotics established in places is actually kind of astonishing. I actually was looking into this for some work on hornets that I was doing. And in the port of Long Beach alone, they bring in something like 500,000 cargo containers a year from across the Pacific. That's one port. Yeah, so why we're not inundated with these things, it's just we're really lucky. That's all I can say. Okay, so what are the economics then of yellowjackets? What are their impacts? You can think of the impact on tourism as being kind of a really grumpy daytime version of bears, if bears stung. In agriculture, they're a problem because they will damage fruit. They want the sugar. People who are picking fruit get stung. In Christmas tree farms, you will get some aerial nests that become problematic. Some of these will attack honeybee colonies, not as effectively as I'll talk about. And in the wine industry, during picking the grapes and during the crush, the amount of sugar in that grape juice is also really attractive to them, and people get stung during that too. So there's a whole variety of things, the impacts that these can have. And they're going to be wherever food's available. So this could be recreational areas, urban, suburban areas, homes, and any kind of food processor or wineries, wherever there's sugar or protein. All right, now the bulb-faced hornet. This is our the one native wasp that we call hornet. And this is related to yellowjackets, but it's probably the biggest of the ones we have native here. All right, bright black and white markings. They're really big beasts. The queens could be, I guess, about an inch. long, something like that. And they make these big aerial nests that are kind of globe-like. Well, you can see the picture here. Often hanging in trees in exposed places. Generally, a couple hundred workers in these, and they only feed on live prey. They particularly like spiders and also flies. So they're actually a valuable thing to have around. Usually, we don't consider them a pest unless somebody blunders into a nest. All right, the true hornets. Now, this is the genus Vespa, and these are beasts. They differ from the other ones I've talked about because they make combs that have all the cells that the larvae develop in, but always encapsulate in an envelope, even if it's inside of something. Vespa crabro, the European hornet, is found throughout, obviously, Europe and parts of North Africa. It's been established now in the eastern United States for probably 100 years. Bright yellow, red, and black coloration with a bright yellow face. And again, makes very large nests wrapped in paper. Now, the Asian giant hornet, this is when everybody's all, oh my God, killer murder hornets and things. Vespa mandarinea. These are native to temperate tropical Asia, preferentially nest in cavities. Obviously, if you look at the size of this nest, big cavities. And these nests can have literally thousands of workers. The average queen in this group can be big. She can produce at least 10,000 offspring. So we really don't want these here. Yeah. So here's a comparison, right? This is the giant Asian hornet, the queen, which is about 2 inches long, compared to the queen of the European hornet, which is, say, 1.5 inches. Yeah, the Asian giant hornet has this massive head, and you'll see why people confuse it with other things in a bit. Massive head. When you see a head like this, that's all jaw muscle, right? So they must have powerful jaws. And then they also have this bright, the whole head is sort of bright yellow to orange. And then the coloration on the rest of the body is basically black and yellow or orange, compared to the European hornet, which has a lot of sort of chestnut colored and so on. A much milder form of hornet. Now, the biology that has people most afraid is that in certain times of year, they will prey specifically on honeybees, and colonies will attack honeybee hives. It's been shown that it only takes about 50 hornets to kill an entire honeybee colony in less than 2 hours, which this may account for the massive jaws, because they will cut honeybees up into little pieces. Okay, there are 8 species of honeybees worldwide, right? And the Asian honeybees, it's a large species, Apis cerana, have lived with hornets long enough to have evolved certain adaptations to defending their colonies against Asian hornets. And they do one of 2 things. One is called balling. It's where the workers will pour out and basically encapsulate an attacking hornet, like in the picture. And they do 2 things. One is that their respiration will drop the amount of available oxygen to critical levels for the hornet if it's completely encased by their bodies. The other thing they do is they shiver their flight muscles and generate enough heat so that they actually kill the hornet by cooking it. Now, the bees, obviously, they're going to lose a few individuals in the process. It's better than losing your entire colony. And they're also more heat tolerant than the hornets are, so they can put up with this longer than they can. The other thing they do to confuse the hornets, because when a hornet worker finds a honeybee colony, it will scent mark it. So, ooh, come back here. And then it'll go back to its colony to bring back other workers. So what these bees do is they will collect animal feces and spread them on the outside of their colonies. And this causes odor confusion for the hornets, so that they can't really reliably find the honeybee colony. You know, so anyway, the Italian bees that we use commercially, the usual honeybees, simply don't have these behaviors. They cannot defend themselves because they have no sort of historical exposure to hornet predation. Now, why are we all panicked about murder hornets? Because, in fact, a queen, or maybe more than one queen, did make it across the Pacific, probably in a cargo container. And they showed up in the vicinity of Vancouver in Washington state. You can see here's a comparison in this man's hand between the queen of a murder hornet and one of our bald-faced hornets. You see how much bigger they are. They're enormous. Now here's where their native distribution is. Basically in Southeast Asia, right? Philippines down to Thailand and regions like that. Now, why is this significant? The reason is, look at the climate they come from, okay? If you look at this habitat, this is basically, if you look at the kinds of overall climatic patterns you have, sort of temperate to dry winters, but always warm, wet summers, okay? Warm, wet summers. You think they're going to make it in California? I doubt it. So here is the same kind of climatic map for the United States. And you can see that warm, wet summers are just basically on this coast, found in Washington and parts of Oregon. Definitely not California. So the two places where these hornets could probably make a go of it are the southeastern United States and the Northwest above California. Very unlikely that they could become established in California. Now, when they got introduced to Vancouver, by the time they found them, it appeared that a nest had been established. Now, you can see from this map, this comes directly from the Washington State Department of Agriculture, that the actual positively identified specimens came from basically 4 places, all within about 60 miles of each other. But you can see the whole rest of the state kind of blew up. People thought they were finding them all over the place, and most of these were incorrect identifications. So what had happened is they found this nest, but it was late in the season. And what this means, remember the biology of these things, is that by late in the summer, well, late in the summer and in the fall, they've already produced new overwintering queens and males. And so they were closing the barn door after the horse got out. What's going to happen is that in spring, they're going to have to be doing some serious surveillance to try to pick up these overwintering queens before colonies get too well underway. Now, so here are the things that have been identified as giant Asian hornets. Number 1 on the hit parade, Jerusalem crickets. Now you can see there's a resemblance. They both have these massive head. Whenever you see a head like that in an insect, it means big jaw muscles. Okay, so the massive orange-colored head, and the stripy abdomen. But beyond that, you know, one of them just doesn't have wings. So then the other things are scoliid wasps, cicada killer wasps, and then there's the occasional flower fly and clear-winged moth. These have all been called in as murder hornets by the public. So we know that they're going to be founding new nests in the spring. It just goes without saying. So the public's going to need protections. I love these cartoons. So going outside in the age of COVID-19, and then going outside in the age of COVID-19 and murder hornets. Yeah. Now there's other cool stuff about these, though, in this whole Vespa hornet group. And recently, well, it's been a few years now, a group, I believe in Stanford, discovered that the Oriental hornet, see, it's mostly brown, it's got a couple of very broad yellow bands and some yellow on the face. This yellow pigment is used to capture sunlight, turn it into electricity, and then to warm up the wasp and allow it to fly. So they are photosynthetic. Prior to this, we had understood that only things like bacteria and plants could photosynthesize. In other words, capture photons from the sun and transform it into something. And now relatives of the murder hornet are doing this too. I love it. And the thing is, that yellow pigment is found on most of the hornets. Maybe it's working that way for all of them. We haven't looked. Okay, so what preys on these things? Top three: bears, turkeys, and skunks. Probably not the best biological control agents in the urban and suburban settings. Same. You know. So what else can you do? Well, in the bad old days, they used to do things like this, where you would use roadkill, or you would hang a dead fish over soapy water, and that would be a way of trapping yellowjackets particularly. Hornets probably wouldn't work so well because they're not really scavengers per se. For yellowjackets, lots of control, traps and things like this. They've got the pheromones that attract them. So it's pretty well under control, assuming you do it at the right time. For hornets, on the other hand, you got to go to your garage and invent something, because there is no commercial hornet trap yet. The ones that they made up in Washington State basically consisted of this: 2-liter plastic soda bottle, some rice wine or something that had some alcohol in it, and fruit juice. And you hang it out with a funnel in it so that the hornet has to crawl in and then it can't get back out again. Very, very old school. And I had to put this in because this is a statement from NC State Cooperative Extension about to control yellowjackets. Long sleeve shirt and long pants may be worn when spraying to make the applicator feel more at ease. They're not saying it's going to work. Do not hold a lit flashlight or stand near car headlights or other lights when you are treating nests. In other words, you're doing this at night. Emerging wasps may be attracted in that direction and sting anybody who's nearby. Yep. Also, finally, do not pour gasoline or petroleum down a nest hole. This is extremely hazardous and environmentally unsound. Yeah, and really dangerous because people like to light them on fire. So don't do that. So control. If you're going to do this, you have to think about the biology, right? So you have to begin colony control before populations get too big. If you wait till June or July, it's way too late. You know, once you have an annoyance problem, you have two choices. One is you can go in and destroy colonies, or do area-wide destruction of workers to try to eliminate the problem from that side. So finding the colonies is one issue. Finding workers and attracting them to these bait traps is another issue, and much easier for the long run. Or you can pray for turkeys. Now I keep bringing up turkeys because I have an example. My sister raises horses up north of here in Mendocino County, and in one of the paddocks where they kept the horses normally, they ended up with a dozen or more yellowjacket nests in the ground in rodent burrows. Right, it's getting to be a huge, huge problem. And then one morning, they went out, and all that was left of the yellowjacket nest was sort of cut, holes in the ground with little scatterings of the nest paper all over the place. And the wild turkeys had come in that night and dug everything up and eaten the larvae in the nests. Yeah, so you could pray, there is a value in turkeys after all. Okay, proper management of garbage, because remember, the pest yellowjackets, like the western yellowjacket, will forage on garbage. Anything that's got protein or sugar on it. And you can then do these traps. Remember I mentioned the pheromone traps, they have attractants, or you could put out baits that contain poison that the workers then take back to the colony to feed other colony members. Okay, baits. All right, it's got to be fresh. They're repelled by stinky, spoiled meat. Cat food works great. The insecticide that you put in it must not be repellent, so it must be microencapsulated. So it doesn't do anything until it's ingested. And then remember the biology, it's all seasonal, right? So the kind of bait or food that you use for capturing them depends on where they are in their food brood production, right? If it's early in the season, they need protein. If it's late in the season, they need sugar. Protein isn't so attractive, right? So late in the season when they're doing maintenance, that's when sugar works great. The other thing, if you're going to remove the nest, only do it at night. And you just have to understand that even these freeze type products, we spray liquid nitrogen or something, they don't stop everything. You need to wear protective clothing that covers everything. And the other thing too is underground nests. Remember, these are in rodent burrows oftentimes, and the nest itself may be some distance from the entrance that you see. So the spray might not reach the nest. And then you might have some very seriously annoyed wasps the next day in the vicinity of the nest. So from bears. Now, it turns out that honeybee suits, like on the one on the bottom, are simply too thin to protect against hornet stings. And so the folks in Washington State ordered these hornet suits from Japan, and they look like space aliens, but this is what they used when they went in and will use when they go in looking for these colonies that seem to have gotten established. The other thing that they do in China is this. I've shown this picture to more people, and they're just so envious that you could actually load up a drone with fuel and an igniter and set these colonies on fire. Don't do this in California. It's a really, really bad idea. And pray for turkeys. Okay, Biodiversity Museum Day. The talks are recorded. You can watch them online. You can donate funds to help keep us doing this. And we really, really appreciate you attending and listening in. Does anybody have any questions? You guys have been awfully quiet. What, no questions? All right, well, if there's nothing more, then thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. And hopefully I'll be talking to you later.